is going on? T-Money.
It is so cold in Joburg. Oh my gosh, what's going on in Cape Town?
Also so cold. I hate it. I really don't like it. I'm wearing like um, my thickest socks and my Rick and Morty let's get Swifty socks. And yeah, just watching it rain outside. I don't like it.
It's so horrible. The worst thing in Joburg is that the sun is shining though. So it gives you that false sense of
That like
security.
crispy cold. That's no good.
Mm-mm, mm-mm. Uh, but anyway,
Yeah, at least the rain is nice because we made pancakes this morning because when it's rainy you feel like pancakes.
look at you just living your best pancake life.
I'm telling you. But we're already recording, so that's part of it. I like it.
But listen, I haven't spoken to you in ages, but I wanted to say congrats on your signing to Universal Global. It's incredible.
Thank you. Yeah, it's crazy.
Um, and also, I understand that sometimes these things are a bit complicated and can get a bit wrapped up in like a lot of red tape. So, explain to me who exactly you've signed with and in which country.
For sure, yeah. I mean, I suppose the press release is just saying global signing are quite misleading in a sense. Well, it's actually quite a lot more complicated than that, but in a really good way. It's a partnership in the UK with a company called Decca Records, and they're famous for like doing Bob Dylan and the Lumineers and this guy I love, Jacob Collier. And then we really wanted to make sure we were bringing on partners were in our strongest territories, and I didn't want to have just like one big partner. We went to Germany, and I met with a bunch of labels there, and in Berlin I found the Polydor team, who are like on fire right now. They're doing like Billie Eilish and all sorts of crazy stuff, and they were just a lovely bunch. So we ended up structuring a JV, like a partnership between Decca and Polydor, who are both under Universal. And then the third party to that contract is Down South Records, which is my new record label. And Down South Records owns Sub-Saharan Africa.
Oh, okay.
And so it's a three-way partnership.
Okay, got you. That makes a lot more sense because when you read the press release, you only kind of that you get from the labels, you get one side of it. So it's nice to talk to you to hear, the ins and outs and the intricacies. That's cool. But now I know that you've always been sort of the champion of the unsigned artists, and in the way that your career has been very DIY. But it looks like your team has expanded quite a bit over the last while. So what does the signing essentially mean for your rights as an independent artist?
Yeah, good question. I'm always going to be the biggest supporter and advocate for artists retaining as many of their rights as they can. And I think more than anything, just like the independent philosophy that you're going to have to make deals in this music business, and it just depends on when and how you make them, and what rights you have to make those deals with. And the problem that happens in this industry is that so many artists don't get the business side right, and they don't think about it enough because it's the last thing that we as artists really want to deal with. And so if you make the mistake of signing over your rights early on in your career, then you can be in a place where you just have no leverage, or you have no ability to maneuver. And so I was always really interested in this, and that's obviously been the cornerstone of my career. I've done a lot of stuff DIY. We've scaled up our own teams, and I've always protected all my rights. All the contracts I've ever entered into are kind of shorter term agreements that I could always find my way out of if I needed to. And the reason I did that was so that I could be ready for a kind of a moment like this, really, when I finally had enough clout and leverage to work with the right people. So, as far as my rights, it definitely changes the way my rights work, but in a really positive way. So I wanted to expand my global presence because we've been pushing internationally for years, and it's been an absolute work of love, but like an uphill slog. And I think most South African bands would, at a minimum, just probably respect the amount of work we've put into trying to kind of lay a pathway out there on the international music stage as a South African act. But it's by no means been easy. It's by no means been cheap. And a lot of other bands have tried and failed for those reasons. It's incredibly tough. And so I was always looking to bring on a bigger team overseas, and especially in our strong markets, because you just can't do it on a South African budget, trying to like hire pluggers and radio people and team members all over the world. So this deal essentially allows me to kind of scale up into those places. And the big thing that I knew that I needed to use all my leverage to fight for were my rights in my home territory, my biggest territory, which is sub-Saharan Africa. So South Africa, our neighboring countries, Kenya, Nigeria, places I want to spend more time touring in the future. And that was the big goal, is how can we leverage the things that are going on. And thankfully it all kind of culminated last year, just after we sold out the Brixton Academy, which is that 5,000-seater room in London, which is a big deal. And a lot of the record labels started noticing us then. And at the same time as that, I was in studio working with like these, really Ed Holloway and Jake Gosling and Ed Sheeran and just all these A-list writers. So there was a lot of kind of buzz for us. And that buzz allowed me to be a lot more, and the fact that I hadn't given up any of my rights, I had everything to negotiate with. And so I was able to negotiate a deal where I started my own record label, Down South Records, and they agreed to release Sub-Saharan Africa out of the contract, and which means that in my strongest territory, I'm free to do what I like and own it how I will and sub-license it as I would. So there's a lot of freedom in there for me, which is actually just a complete blessing.
Okay, so explain to me how you managed to retain your rights to Southern Africa specifically.
Well, I've got an amazing team. That's one of the ways. You have to. It was definitely not an easy ask, and to be dealing with those companies at that scale. But yeah, I mean, we lawyered up. That was one thing. I hired the best lawyers money can buy in the UK, guys who are negotiating huge deals like this all the time. And then Damon Forbes, my long-standing manager, he's been by my side through all of this. So he would fly over for a lot of those meetings with me. Sometimes when I was on tour, I'd go for meetings, and I think we're a pretty good tag team when it comes to that stuff. So we just pushed for a long time, and you find the right legal help.
I mean, you really are an example of persistence and hard work paying off. It's really, really no, you are, Jeremy, for real. It's super inspiring to hear. But now you mentioned a name. You mentioned somebody by the name of Ed Sheeran, which obviously I want to talk about because this is huge news, right? How do you go from meeting him at an after party to chilling with him on his estate in his home studio, writing songs with him?
Yeah, that's not small news, eh?
No, it's not.
It kind of just went out the other day, and didn't really. I mean, we haven't given it much focus. I think, to be honest, I think you and I need to jump on a call closer to the time when those songs that I worked on with Ed start to come, because there definitely were some really interesting stories from that time, and the amount of build up. And I thought it was all a joke when he first kind of sent me an email, and we didn't have any managers involved. It was all just direct. He was just emailing me and saying, like, let's write together. You should come over here and write. When do you have time? I'm home in October. And obviously no one in my team could even believe it. And it turned out that he'd been actually kind of following my career to some extent, because we're both loop artists, but I've always looped with a band. I've always looped other artists in, and some of my live shows kind of quite dynamic and big. And I think he's wanted to do that for a long time. And so when we met that night, he spent a lot of time just quizzing me on how logistically and technically I'm playing with a whole band. But that led to them, and I think I'm happy to chat to you about all of that down the line. But right now, I'm in the middle of releasing some of these first songs, And to be honest, the list of people I've been working with for the new songs that we're going to be releasing first off my album is no different. The songs coming next. There's a song I did with a guy called Kerry Willits, who's the guy who did the Dermot Kennedy records.
Amazing.
And there's Ed Holloway for the song after that, who produced the song that's coming out third, I think, in line, and he's the Lewis Capaldi producer. So we really, literally just, I got myself into all the best studios and with all the best people over there just to make sure that this next album was my best work.
So you've released Mortal Man, and now you just named a couple of people that you've worked with and tracks that are going to be released. But when can we expect the third album?
Well, it's totally uncertain. The third album was supposed to be coming out this side of, we wanted originally last year to launch in May, just before summer. I was due to go over for our biggest kind of world tour starting in June, which had us going to the biggest festivals I've ever done. We had main stage slots at Boardmasters, and it was ridiculous. This was the summer of all summers for the Jeremy Loops band, but it was all obviously cancelled. So a lot of drama there. And so, everything's just kind of on ice. I think my plan is just releasing songs. I don't think it makes sense to drop the album until we know when we can go and tour again, because we obviously want to drop that album and then go and tour all around the world, including South Africa, just start moving and playing all those new songs. So until I've booked another tour, which we haven't been able to book it, we're all just on ice. I don't know when the album will be released, but I've recorded so many of these songs, and I'm at home now, so we're like finessing them. I'm doing acoustic versions of them in my home studio. I was on this beautiful session last week with Simone Felice, who's the guy who did the 2 Lumineers albums. He's a huge fan, a huge inspiration of mine, and he helped make an acoustic version of Mortal Man. He kind of produced it with me, all over the internet. But so those are the kind of things I'm doing. So Mortal Man's dropped now, but we're going to drop an acoustic version of it, done by the Lumineers guy with me, and we're going to then drop the next song and the next song. I think I'm just going to drop music until we have a clearer picture of when we can drop the album. And if that means I have to write new songs along the way, and the album ends up having different songs on, I've definitely got enough time to do that.
Well, it sounds like not much has changed for you in terms of your workload. It sounds like you're busier than ever. But I do want to rope you into coming to do a podcast with me on Text Talks when closer to the time of the album launch, because I think you love to talk just as much as I do. So I think it'll make...
You and I, we have a chinwag. I'm all about it. I also was thinking that you were the first person who's actually asked me about the specifics of how these deals work, because you are one of the people in the industry that cares about how this industry works. We were discussing the other day that we actually kind of started at the same time, you and I. It's been like 10 years of like heavy graft in this world. And it just also made me think that this sort of content is actually super important. Like the business side of how music works is just clearly a side that so many artists struggle with. And it's certainly a side that I've gravitated towards and I quite enjoy. And I feel like at some stage I need to almost try and get some of that knowledge out there and make it a bit more accessible. That's maybe just a statement. I don't know why I'm saying that. That's just like, maybe we can talk about those things in more depth sometime.
Yeah, I feel like we should have a separate conversation about that. We've got a lot to talk about, Jeremy.
I'm telling you. Well, it's nice to chat.
Yeah, no, it's great to chat to you, and we'll chat closer to the time of the album drop again.
Yeah, I'll keep you updated how that all goes, and we can just we'll play it by ear. Okay. Take care of you, love yourself in that cold weather.
I'm gonna try. Bye.
Bye.